We've seen that lists allow us to group or collect together data, but now how do we work with all the data in the list? What if we want to do something with each item in the list? And this brings us to the subject of for loops. And to write a for loop, the template is we write the keyword for. So this is a reserved word. Then we provide some L value that I'll call the loop variable, and we'll talk about this in a second. We write the keyword in, and then we write what is known as an iterable, followed by a colon. That line constitutes the header of the for loop. And then, as indented code, we write the body of the loop. This loop variable is, again, an L value. In other words, something that we could place on the left side of an assignment operator. So typically this will just be some valid identifier. And as for that iterable, we'll see there are various things in Python that are iterables. But for now, all that we need to worry about is that a list is a type of iterable. So a list could appear in that position in the header. And an iterable is just something that can return its elements one at a time. The body is indented code that's executed once for each item in the list, and you should think of a for loop as being a for each loop. And the way it works is for each element in the iterable, the element is assigned to the loop variable, and then the body is executed. Here's an example. Let's say we need to give a loop variable. Let's just give the identifier item in, and now let's write a list with an integer 1, the string 2, the integer 97, the string 4, and the expression 10 divided by 2. That's our header. When we hit return, we don't get the interactive prompt back because idle knows, hey, you've started a for loop, now give me the body, and it's already indented the cursor for us. And let's just say print what the item is. If we hit return once, it's still indented, but if we hit return again, the loop will be executed. And there we see, one at a time, each of the items from the list. Here's a slight variation on this loop where we initialize a counter outside of the loop and increment it by 1 within the body of the loop. So let's take an identifier count and initialize it with the integer 0, and then I will recall that loop that I had before. So that's exactly the same loop, but now I will modify it so that it also prints the count as well as the item from the list. And then within the body of the loop, I will increment this count variable by 1. So I'll take its current value, add to it 1, and reassign that back to the same identifier. Hit return once and twice, and there we see each item from the list preceded by a count, and that count starts from 0, and it might seem a little odd to start from 0 instead of from 1. We're used to having lists start with item 1 and continue on from there, but we'll revisit this issue of starting from 0 a little bit later. In this loop, the variable count is serving as an accumulator. So an accumulator is something that we initialize outside of the loop, and then it changes within the loop, and that change is based on that particular variable's current value. So in that loop above, we accumulated a count. We just took the current value of the count, incremented it by 1, and then reassigned that back to the same variable. Here's another example of using a for loop. First, let's create a list of names, and we'll go with Jill, June, Joan, Jade, and how about Judy. Now, let's write a greeting to each of these people, and we'll say for name in names, what we will do is simply print the string hi, then the name, then an exclamation point, and let's set the separator equal to the empty string, and when we hit return twice, we get a greeting to each of these persons. And it's a common idiom to have the identifier for a list be a plural noun, like names with an S, and the identifier for the loop variable be the single form of that noun. So name instead of names. So we have for name in names. Now, of course, we could use any identifier or L value we want for the loop variable. But again, this is a very common idiom, and it makes the code a little bit more readable. We can create an empty list by just writing square brackets with nothing in them. For example, we could say grades is equal to just an open and close bracket, and that's an empty list. If we looked at the length of grades, no surprise, it's 0. And it might seem like that's a bizarre waste. Why create a list with nothing in it? But an empty list is often used as a starting point for creating a meaningful list. So let's give an example of that. Let's say for I in the list, and we'll just give a literal list here, 1, 2, and 3. What we will do is we will take the grade variable and assign to that whatever input returns when the user is prompted with the string enter grade. And then once we have that grade, we will take the grades list and append to it that grade. Now let's hit return twice, enter grade. Let's go with a 95, another grade, maybe 73, and another grade of 84. Now what does that grades list look like? Well, there are those 3 grades that we entered, but as strings, so that's something to keep in mind. Notice that we didn't use the loop variable I at all in the body of this loop, and nothing says we have to use that loop variable. And a for loop is sometimes called a counted loop, and here we were just trying to do something 3 times, and it didn't really matter what the values of the loop variable were. We just wanted to do something 3 times. We wanted to read in the grade 3 times. Let's try again to read in these grades. So let's reset the grades list to be the empty list, and let's again have a loop header that's for I in the list of 1, 2, 3. And now what we will do is directly take the grades list and append to that the float value of whatever the input function gives us. When we prompt the user with enter grade, and then we'll put the number sign, and that's not indicating a comment if it's part of a string, and then we will concatenate with that. There is the function str, which will convert its argument to a string, and we will say the loop variable I, let's convert that to a string. So actually here we are going to use the loop variable, and we'll concatenate to that just a colon, space, and then it may not all fit on this line, but let's put 1 close parentheses, 2 close parentheses, and 3 close parentheses. And sure enough, that spilled over to the next line. Let's hit return once and twice, and now we have enter grade number 1, that was a 95, grade number 2, that was a 73, and grade number 3, that was 84, but this time I entered 83. Now, what are the contents of this grades list? We have the 95.0, 73.0, and then 83.0. So they're all float values. Now that we have all these grades, let's calculate an average grade, and recall that we obtain an average by summing all the values and then dividing by the number of values. And let's start with an accumulator. We'll call it total, and as of now the total is 0, and we'll use a for loop to add all the grades to this total. So we'll say for grade in grades, what we want to do is assign to total the total plus the grade. And if we hit return once and twice, and now look at total, we get 251, and that is indeed the sum of all these grades. If we want the average, we could just take the total and divide it by, let's not divide it by 3, let's make this completely general and say we'll take the length of the grades list, that happens to be 3, but if it was 4, 10, or 57, wouldn't matter, we would just get whatever the length was of that list and do that division. And if we look what the average grade is now, there it is, 83 2/3. As something of an aside, Python provides a built-in function called sum that will sum all the values in a list. So if we just said sum and pass to it the list grades, we get 251. So we could have more simply calculated the average by writing sum of grades divided by the length of the grades. And what is the average? It's still 83 2/3, but we wanted to use the for loop for instructional purposes. Okay, so for loops provide a way to cycle through all the elements of a list, and in the next video we'll see how to directly access a single element of a list.